Hello, welcome back to the channel, and if you're new here, hi, I'm Debbie and I make art videos. In today's video, we'll be playing around with oil pastels. It's something I'm not very familiar with, but Arrtx kindly sent along a set of 48 colors, and I'm super excited to see what we can do with them. So let's get started. So as indicated on the box, these are soft oil pastels, and if you want this kind of painterly application, that's what you're looking for. The softer, the better. And Arrtx also sent along a box of white, and that is very handy because when you're mixing lighter tones, you're gonna go through a lot of white. Thanks for that, Arrtx. And these are super creamy and much softer than any other pastel that I own. I've heard that the Sennelier pastels are very soft. I can't imagine them being softer than this, but you're also paying for a premium at that point. There's a nice selection of vibrant colors. I like the color selection, but those white are definitely necessary if you're going to do something like portraiture or something, or if you have another set with a bit more pastel-y toned colors, that might also be handy. So here are a bunch of tools that might be handy when working with oil pastels. This is Gamsol. It is a mineral spirit, a low odor mineral spirit, and I decanted some into a little container. I also have some cotton swabs or earbud things, and a toothpick for a scratching tool. I brought this makeup sponge out. I'm not sure if it's useful. I got some painter's tape, paper towel, a must paper towel, and I forgot to mention fixative in the back there. So after watching a bunch of videos, the consensus amongst most artists is that you want to use a paper that is at least 120 GSM when working with pastels. Some people prefer soft paper, and some people prefer a paper with a bit more tooth, so something like a pastel paper. Oil pastels never cure, so you're going to want something to protect your piece after it's done. I just have tracing paper. Somebody else mentioned using glassine, I believe it's called. And I just have a little tray on the side here and a mat on my desk, just as a precaution, and I'm glad I did put that down. So I'm going to be swatching the colors here. This can be a very messy process. It's a pretty messy material. So what Yolanda Blasquez recommended is to clean your hands very regular while you're working, and also clean your pastels regularly while you're working. And I'm glad that I put that paper towel roll close by because I ended up using it quite often. Another recommendation from many YouTubers was to either use gloves or to use a barrier cream as a precaution and also for ease of cleanup for afterwards. Now I wanted to do a landscape study with these oil pastels because it's something that I need to practice, and I chose this piece by Lawren Harris, and it's called Birch Tree. And I used a Pit Pastel pencil to put in the line work. In hindsight, I should have switched to a second colored pastel to do the line work because it got quite messy and I got confused at the beginning there. Although this composition is very abstract and seemingly simple, there's a lot of different objects and lots of geometric shapes that you have to get right in order for the picture to look right, and I was losing my way some of the time. I started off slowly with this white and lemon yellow mixture because the background was kind of like this bright yellow, and I wasn't sure how to blend, so I was testing that out. And I also thought that if I got that in sort of like negative painting around the tree, that I could get my bearings a little bit better. There aren't very many colors in this painting. It's mostly kind of the background coming through, which is this orangey hue, and then lots of different kind of variations of blue. And I was having a hard time finding the right combination of blue that I needed. I ended up realizing that I had picked up the wrong pastel and left that one blue critical color in the box the whole time. But I did eventually find a little formula. It involved 3 shades of blue, but until I got there, it was a little bit back and forth testing it out. And even if you don't get the color right, like exactly the same as the image that you're trying to replicate, if you just get like a similar relationship, so that it does the same kind of thing next to each other, then it'll still look right. So that has to do with value and temperature. The black was a literal godsend because it definitely helped me anchor, and I just love black. But it definitely gave me a lot of little points to like find myself, and so I didn't lose my way. And just having this very kind of graphic tree in the middle helped me just not get too lost, although I did get lost. And yeah, constantly cleaning my pastels, because especially with this piece that has a lot of very light values, if you get them muddied, they're gonna look wrong. And I wanted to keep it very vibrant and clean. So I made sure to keep my tools clean. I think it was also Yolanda Blasquez who mentioned that she likes working from left to right because she's right-handed. And I did want to initially start that way, but because I was kind of confused in this composition, I had to jump around. And because of that, I had to be very careful about not putting my palm down anywhere. That's something to keep in mind because this is super smudgy. You're gonna make a huge mess. So you might want to use a paper underneath your palm if you need to get your palm in there. But I would suggest just to like be aware of where your hand is at all times, so you don't smear things that you don't want to smear, because especially with very soft pastels like these, it's super blendable. I chose this pastel paper to work with. This is from Canson, and because it was closest to the color that I was looking for, but also because it had a lot of tooth, and I noticed that in this painting that I'm trying to replicate, it's very kind of impasto style, so that means that there's like thick layers of paint on there. So I wanted to work in that way very thickly with the oil pastel. And I'm glad I did this as a first play around with the oil pastels. In the future, I would like to try something that's more smooth and blended, but using it in this way was so different from what I'm used to because I'm a water media kind of person and I never really get thick paint experiences. So this was sort of jumping right into that very thick paint experience, and I actually enjoyed it more than I thought I would. And I got that tip from the virtual instructor. I'll list all the artists that I mentioned down in the description box. I'm really into this thing of like this color vibration, and the underpainting in the original was a bit brighter orange than the paper that I had. So I tried to like stick in some little hints of orange to punch out those little almost like lines in between all of the shapes here. And I wish I had done that actually a little bit more, because it was hard to do it afterwards. So I think I either had to make thicker lines with the soft pastel pencil initially, or before I went in with the cloud shapes to make sure I got those little accents of orange that I was doing, but just more thoroughly. And this is when it started getting really fun. So I remembered that Misako Flodin had mentioned that she uses a rubber blending tool, so a silicone tipped tool, and I have some of these for sculpting. It's often at the craft store in the Fimo department, so like polymer clay, people use it a lot, but you can use it as a simulation paint stroke. And I found that very satisfying. So I noticed that a lot of the clouds had this kind of like flat brush mark that kind of just went swooping across. And there were very little marks, but very fresh marks. And I wanted to try to do some of that mark making stuff because it's something I never experienced with water-based media, because it never gets thick enough to do those kind of expressive marks. So I had so much fun with that little rubber tool. And it also keeps your fingers clean because you're not using your fingers, and you can get them in different shapes. So I'm not sure if it's practical in all the different shapes, but this kind of little flat edged one was super practical and super fun. As I got more experience with the tool, I realized that I had to like move in the direction that I wanted the stroke, and I had to be aware of what color was on top in order to have that smear be more prominent. And sometimes I'd have to go back and add a bit more with the actual pastel tool to just get a better mark, but it was a really good exploration for me that's not used to using kind of thick paint. I'm gonna give myself a little pat on the back for picking out this piece to do a study of, because it ended up being really the perfect thing, because there was a lot of repetition, and so I could just repeat certain actions on the clouds and stuff and try to figure things out. And it was simple enough in the color palette that I wasn't getting bogged down in making very, very intricate values. And because it was so graphic, I didn't lose my way. This is one of the things that intimidates me about landscapes. There's just so much information there and I get lost. So somehow this was just the perfect subject matter. Also, as a Canadian, Lawren Harris is just something that I know and I'm familiar with. I've seen his work a lot. If you go to art school in Canada, there's no way that you don't know who he is. So maybe that's something that is also helpful, to do something that you've seen before so that it isn't too much information, you know? It's like if you're used to seeing something, then you kind of understand what you're looking at, if you know what I mean. It's sort of like every artist has their own language, and if you're used to looking at an artist, then you kind of like learn to speak their language because you know what conventions they use. And I guess people call it style, but I think language is a better word. Putting in these little leaves was like super fun, and this is such a Canadian scene. And these little like leaves that are left over at the end of the fall before the winter comes, it's magical. I know that some people sharpen their pastels, but these are so soft, I would not recommend it. If you want to try maybe with a knife or something, Misako Floden uses one of those like little paper nib things. What are they called? Those little smudgers. And she dabs a little bit of her oil paint on the tip and then uses that. But I thought I would just try going in with a pastel. It kind of scratches things off, so it doesn't totally work. And I did have to clean that tool as well in between line making. But where I did have more of the paper surface showing, it did work pretty well. So that paper really got saturated and it's super thick. And I'm going to try out Sennelier's pastel spray because that seems to be the go-to for most oil pastel artists, just to see how that goes, and I'll let you know, because storage of these things is kind of tricky. But I enjoyed myself, and I feel like this is kind of like a gateway drug to oil painting. Thanks to the mat for protecting my table, and this rubber tool, you were awesome. Thanks to Arrtx for sending me these oil pastels. I had a lot of fun with them, and if you are looking for a set, there'll be links in the description box below. Thank you for sticking around till the end, and if you have any tips on how to use oil pastels, I'm all ears, because you know, I'm super new to this, and I'd love some little hacks if you got any. And if you want to see any more from me, there'll be a video popping up here shortly. And like and subscribe. Do all the good things. And I'll see you all at the next one. Bye now.